Welcome back to the Daily Financial News Roundup. Ready to jump into today's top financial stories?
Absolutely. Seems like we've got a lot to unpack today.
We do. Starting with former President Trump. He's stirring things up again in the international trade world.
Oh, how so?
He's called for investigations into those digital service taxes that countries like Britain, France, and Canada have put on our big U.S. tech companies.
Ah, right. You mean those taxes aimed at companies like Google and Meta and Apple?
Exactly. Those are the ones.
This sounds familiar. Is this another move towards those trade war tactics we saw during his presidency?
Possibly. You know, those digital service taxes are meant to make sure these huge tech companies pay their fair share in the countries where they do business.
Right, right.
But Trump sees it as, well, an attack on American companies.
I see, I see. So should investors with stock in these companies be worried?
That's the question, isn't it? What do you think? Should they be hitting that panic button?
I wouldn't say panic just yet. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on, though. If these investigations actually lead to new tariffs, it could squeeze those companies' profits.
Makes sense. Higher costs usually mean less profit, which could ultimately impact stock prices.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's move over to Apple now. Seems like CEO Tim Cook has told Trump that Apple is planning a huge investment in U.S. manufacturing.
Huge. How huge are we talking?
We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars, kind of huge. There's even been talk about moving some production from Mexico back to the U.S.
Wow. Now, this is interesting. Is this a real commitment to creating jobs here in the U.S., or is it a strategic move to avoid those potential tariffs we were just discussing?
That's the million-dollar question. Trump has been very vocal about wanting companies to bring manufacturing back to the U.S.
He has. So this could be Apple trying to stay in his good graces while also potentially softening the blow of any future trade conflicts.
It's definitely a power play. But couldn't it also be seen as Apple caving to political pressure?
Oh, absolutely. And it really makes you think about the future of these global supply chains when politics and economics get all tangled up like this.
It does.
Will we see more companies bringing production back to their home countries in response to this kind of pressure? It's a question a lot of companies are wrestling with right now.
Yeah, a trend to watch for sure. All right, let's switch gears now from trade wars to the world of logistics.
Logistics, always a thriller.
Right. But there's news here too. The 18th Global Freight Forwarders Conference just wrapped up in Bangkok. And it was a big one.
Big how?
Almost 2,000 logistics companies from over 100 countries attended.
Wow, that's a lot of logistics in one place. What does that tell us?
Well, I think it highlights how essential global trade is and the importance of the people who make it all happen.
True, true. Freight forwarders don't always get the spotlight, but they're essential.
They really are the unsung heroes, coordinating the movement of goods across all those borders, dealing with shipping, customs, international regulations, all of it.
Yeah, they keep the global economy moving.
Exactly. So what were the big takeaways from this massive gathering of logistics experts? What were people talking about?
Well, I think the record attendance itself speaks volumes. Even with all the geopolitical stuff going on, there's a strong commitment to international trade and cooperation within the logistics sector.
And I'm guessing technology was a big part of the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Digital platforms and data analytics are revolutionizing the industry, helping companies track shipments in real time, optimize routes, streamline processes. The pace of innovation is mind-blowing.
It really is. Okay, so we've covered trade wars and the behind-the-scenes world of global logistics, but we've got one more big story for today, and it involves a familiar name, Elon Musk.
Uh-oh, what's he up to now?
This time, he's set his sights on OpenAI, that artificial intelligence powerhouse he co-founded.
Right, I remember. And didn't he recently make them a pretty substantial offer?
He did. We're talking a $97 billion offer to acquire OpenAI.
$97 billion. And what did they say?
They turned him down.
They rejected a $97 billion offer. What's going on there?
Well, it's no secret that there's been some tension between Musk and OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, ever since Musk left the board back in 2018.
Oh, right. And Musk has been pretty vocal about his issues with the direction OpenAI has been taking.
He has. He argues they've strayed from their original mission of creating safe and beneficial AI, even going so far as to start his own AI company, xAI, as a direct competitor.
So is this bid just a power play by Musk? Is he trying to regain control and steer OpenAI back on the course he thinks it should be on?
It could be. And it's worth noting that OpenAI is in the process of moving from a nonprofit to a for-profit structure. That might have been a factor in Musk's timing.
Interesting. It's a bold move for sure. But what happens now? How does OpenAI move on after rejecting such a huge offer, especially with their plans to change their structure?
That's the big question, isn't it? This whole situation brings up some really interesting points, like how do you even put a price tag on a company like OpenAI?
That's a good question. They're leading the charge in AI with groundbreaking models like ChatGPT and Daily, but it's still early days in terms of figuring out how to make money from them.
Exactly. So valuing them is a bit of a guessing game.
A very high-stakes guessing game. And what about Musk? Does he just walk away? Or is this just the first move in a bigger battle for control?
Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, this story isn't over yet. It's a high-stakes game of chess being played out in the world of AI, and we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on it.
Welcome back to the Daily Financial News Roundup.
Let's pick up where we left off, shall we? Elon Musk and his bid for OpenAI, that move really got people talking.
It did. And one of the biggest questions that came up is, was his offer even realistic? $97 billion.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, even for Musk. It's tough to say what OpenAI is truly worth.
It is. They are at the forefront of AI. There's no doubt about that. Those models they've developed, ChatGPT, Daily, they're game changers.
They are. But OpenAI is still a young company,
Yeah.
and they haven't really figured out the whole making money part yet.
Right. So some analysts are saying Musk's offer was way too high. They think OpenAI's actual value is much, much lower.
Interesting. But others think OpenAI has so much potential that it could be worth way more than $97 billion down the line. It's kind of like trying to predict which startup is going to be the next Google or Amazon.
Exactly. It's all about potential, not just how they're doing right now. And this whole valuation debate really brings up some questions about OpenAI's plans to become a for-profit company.
It does. Some people are worried that this shift could change OpenAI's original mission. You know, that whole idea of developing AI that's safe and actually benefits humanity.
I see what you mean. They're worried that a for-profit OpenAI will prioritize profits over ethics and safety.
Exactly.
It's a valid concern. A company's priorities can definitely shift when the main goal is to make money for shareholders. But OpenAI insists they're still committed to ethical AI development, even with this new for-profit model.
Well, I guess time will tell how this all plays out.
It will. It's definitely a complicated issue. Now, let's circle back to those trade tensions for a minute. Trump reopening those investigations into digital service taxes. It feels like we're taking a step backward.
It does a bit, doesn't it? It's like we were moving towards a more cooperative approach to trade, and now this.
I know. These digital service taxes have been a point of contention for a while now.
Yeah, the core issue is where should these tech giants pay their taxes? They operate globally, but they don't have a big physical presence in a lot of countries. So it's tricky for governments to tax them effectively.
Exactly. That's why countries like France and the UK decided to implement these digital service taxes. They want to get some of the revenue from these companies that are making money within their borders.
Makes sense. But the U.S. sees it as unfair. Like, they're picking on American companies.
Right. They say these taxes discriminate against U.S.-based companies and go against international trade agreements. And they've even threatened to retaliate with tariffs if these taxes aren't dropped.
So here we are again, back in the middle of a potential trade war.
Yep. And the impact on businesses and consumers could be huge. Think about it. Tariffs mean higher prices for consumers and lower profits for businesses.
And then there's the potential for supply chain disruptions and uncertainty in the global economy. And the timing of all this is pretty worrying, considering how fragile things are right now.
It is. The global economy is still recovering from the pandemic, and now we have the war in Ukraine adding more instability. A trade war would be bad for everyone involved.
I agree. Hopefully they can come to some kind of agreement. Well, on a slightly brighter note, let's talk about Apple and their plans for U.S. manufacturing.
Oh, yes. This is big news, potentially. Word on the street is that Apple CEO Tim Cook told former President Trump that the company is planning to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. manufacturing.
Yep, and they might even shift some of their production from Mexico back to the U.S.
Well, if that happens, it's a big win for Trump's America First agenda. He's been pushing hard to bring those manufacturing jobs back to the U.S.
He has. But we can't forget about Apple's side of things. They might just be doing this to avoid those potential tariffs we were talking about.
Right. We can't assume it's purely out of some deep commitment to U.S. manufacturing. Companies like Apple rely on those global supply chains to keep their costs down.
Yeah.
Shifting production back to the U.S. could get expensive.
Exactly. And that could affect their profits.
Of course. But I think it's probably a combination of factors at play here. Keeping the Trump administration happy hedging against trade risks, and maybe even a belief that investing in U.S. manufacturing is a good long-term strategy.
It's interesting, isn't it? Regardless of their reasons, a move like this could have a ripple effect.
Oh, definitely. If Apple puts a bunch of money into U.S. manufacturing, other companies might feel like they have to follow suit.
Right. It could signal a shift towards more local production, especially for those really important technologies. A big change from that globalized model we've seen for so long.
It would be. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, let's take a quick detour back to that Global Freight Forwarders Conference in Bangkok.
The logistics world. That event really highlighted how crucial logistics is to the global economy.
It did. With almost 2,000 companies from over 100 countries there, it really shows how interconnected we all are.
And sometimes we forget about that complex web of transportation, warehousing, customs procedures, all those things that make global trade possible.
Hmm.
Without those companies, we wouldn't have access to so many of the goods we rely on.
They're the unsung heroes, keeping everything moving smoothly.
And that conference showcased all the latest and greatest in logistics technology. Digital platforms, automation, data analytics, they're making everything more efficient, more sustainable, more resilient.
It's a constantly evolving field, and that conference gave those industry leaders a chance to share their knowledge, collaborate, and shape the future of global logistics.
I'm sure it did. Okay, so we've talked about trade wars, logistics, and now let's go back to Elon Musk and his bid for OpenAI for a moment.
That whole situation has really sent shockwaves through the tech world, raises a lot of questions about the future of AI development, competition, ethical concerns.
For sure. And one of the concerns is that Musk might end up with too much power in the world of AI. Think about it. He's already leading Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink.
Right. Those companies are pushing the boundaries of technology as it is.
Exactly. If you add OpenAI to the mix, he'd have a huge amount of control over how AI is developed and used.
That's a good point. And that raises some concerns about potential conflicts of interest and whether we need more regulations around AI. Some people are worried that Musk is too focused on achieving artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
You mean an AI that's smarter than humans in every way? That's some sci-fi stuff right there.
It is, and they worry that this kind of thinking could lead to AI systems that are out of control and could actually pose a threat to humanity.
Yeah, that's been a debate for a while, and Musk's bid for OpenAI has definitely brought it back to the forefront. It's a good reminder that we need to have ethical guidelines in place to ensure that AI benefits everyone.
I agree. It's a responsibility that falls on all of us, researchers, developers, policymakers, the public. We all need to work together to make sure AI is developed in a way that's safe, beneficial, and aligns with our values.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Welcome back to the Daily Financial News Roundup.
We're in the home stretch now, ready to wrap up today's show.
We are, and I think it's a good time to step back and look at the bigger picture. All these stories we've been talking about, the trade tensions, the AI developments, they're all connected in a way.
They are, aren't they? It's like a giant web.
It is. For instance, think about Trump's investigation into those digital service taxes and Apple's possible investment in U.S. manufacturing. On the surface, they seem like separate things, but
But they're both part of that same story, right? Trump's protectionist policies are creating an environment where companies like Apple feel like they have to play along with his America First agenda.
exactly. It really highlights how closely politics and economics are tied together.
It does. It's like a message to all those big multinational companies. If you want to do business in the U.S., you got to play by our rules.
And it makes you wonder about the future of globalization. Are we moving towards a world where companies prioritize national interests over global ones?
It's a good question. We're already seeing that happen in some industries. The pandemic really exposed how vulnerable those global supply chains are.
It did. And now companies are trying to diversify to not be so reliant on any one country.
Right. This shift towards more regionalized production could have a big impact on the global economy, though.
It could. It might lead to higher costs, less efficiency, and even more tension between countries.
It's a complicated issue with no easy solutions. Investors and business leaders need to pay attention to this as they make decisions.
Agreed. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and think about the AI landscape. Musk's bid for OpenAI really shines a light on just how fierce the competition is in that space.
Doesn't it? The race to develop and deploy advanced AI is really heating up. We've got those tech giants like Google and Microsoft pouring billions into AI research. And now you've got Musk trying to get back in the game.
He's not giving up. And it's not just about profits. It's about who has control over a technology that has the potential to fundamentally change how we live?
That's the big question, isn't it? AI is already being used in so many areas: healthcare, transportation, finance, education. And as those AI systems become even more sophisticated, their impact is only going to grow.
And that raises some pretty big questions. Who controls these technologies? How are they going to be used? What safeguards are in place to make sure they're used responsibly?
Those are the questions we need to be asking. We need to have those conversations as a society. We need those ethical guidelines for AI development to make sure these technologies actually benefit everyone.
I couldn't agree more. Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to that Global Freight Forwarders Conference one last time. That event really drove home the importance of international cooperation, especially in a world that feels increasingly interconnected.
It did. And despite all the talk about protectionism and nationalism, global trade is still growing. Logistics companies are going to be key players in all of this.
They are. They're the ones moving those goods across borders, navigating all the regulations, making sure those supply chains stay strong, even when things get tough.
It's a big job. And while there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, there are also lots of opportunities for those who are willing to adapt, innovate, and work together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a time of big change, definitely some upheaval, but there's also a lot of potential for positive change.
Absolutely. By staying informed and engaged, we can all play a part in shaping a better future.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of today's Daily Financial News Roundup.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll be back tomorrow with more news and analysis to help you navigate the ever-changing world of finance and technology. See you then.